Hey guys! Tonight's story is a day in the life of a royal servant, a slow, quiet journey through palace halls where nothing urgent ever happens, and every small task repeats like a lullaby. We'll follow gentle routines, long pauses, and the peaceful rhythm of an ordinary day meant to help your mind slow down and drift away. If you enjoy stories where time feels softer and sleep comes naturally, this one is made just for you. So get comfortable. And if this calm helps you relax, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Sleeping Stone Whispers, and let these quiet stories keep you company every night. Crescent moon. The servant woke before the bells, as he always did, not because he needed to, but because his body no longer knew how to sleep past that quiet hour. The room was still dark, the kind of dark that felt soft rather than heavy, and the air carried the faint chill of stone walls that had never truly warmed, even in summer. He lay still for a moment, listening. No footsteps yet. No voices. Only the distant hush of the palace settling into another day. He sat up slowly, careful not to rush, and placed his feet on the floor. The stone was cool and familiar beneath his soles. This floor had been the same for years, unchanged and dependable, and he liked that about it. He reached for his uniform, folded neatly on the small wooden chair beside the bed. He had folded it the night before, just as he always did, smoothing the fabric with calm, practiced hands. The servant dressed in the same order each morning. Shirt first. Then the long, dark vest. Then the belt, tightened to the same notch it had rested on for as long as he could remember. Each movement was slow and unremarkable, and that was exactly how it should be. There was comfort in knowing nothing unexpected would happen during these moments. The palace demanded consistency, and he was happy to give it that. When he finished dressing, he washed his face in a small basin, the water cool and clear. He dried his hands on a towel that smelled faintly of soap and linen. He did not look at his reflection for long. There was no need. His face had not changed much over the years, and the palace did not care what he looked like, only that he arrived on time and did his duties quietly. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The palace halls were wide and empty at this hour, stretching out in long, straight lines that seemed to soften in the low light. A single torch flickered at the far end, casting slow shadows that moved gently along the walls. His footsteps echoed softly, though he had learned to walk in a way that barely disturbed the silence. As he walked, he passed doors that would remain closed for hours. Behind them, nobles still slept, unaware of the many small preparations already beginning around them. The servant did not resent this. It was simply how things were. The palace worked best when everyone stayed in their place, following the same rhythms day after day. He reached the eastern hall just as the first hint of morning began to show through the high windows. The light was pale and faint, not yet strong enough to brighten the stone floor, but enough to remind him that time was moving forward, slowly and steadily. He paused for a moment, standing still, letting the quiet settle around him. Soon, the bells would ring. They always did. But for now, there was only this in-between moment, where the palace belonged to no one in particular. He enjoyed these moments most, when the halls felt empty and peaceful, and the day had not yet asked anything of him. When he resumed walking, he did so without hurry. There was no need to rush. His tasks would wait for him, just as they always had. The lamps would need lighting, the corridors would need passing through, and the long day would unfold exactly as expected. And that, he thought, was a good way to begin. After the bells had finished ringing and the palace slowly began to stir, the servant returned briefly to his small room. This, too, was part of the routine. Though he was already dressed, there were things to be checked, adjusted, and made ready for later. The room looked exactly as it had earlier, calm and undecorated, with nothing unnecessary to distract the eye. He removed the extra cloth he wore during the early hours and laid it flat on the bed. Folding was not something he rushed. He believed it deserved time. He smoothed the fabric with the palms of his hands, pressing out wrinkles that were barely there to begin with. The uniform was dark and plain, designed not to draw attention. It had been made years ago, repaired carefully whenever a seam loosened or a hem wore thin. He folded one sleeve inward, then the other, aligning the edges with quiet precision. Each fold followed the same pattern he had learned long ago, taught by another servant who had since retired and moved on to a quieter life somewhere beyond the palace walls. The servant never questioned the order of the folds. It felt important to keep them exactly the same, as if changing them might disturb something larger than himself. The room remained silent except for the soft sound of fabric brushing against itself. Outside the small window, the sky had grown brighter, though the light was still gentle and cool. He could hear faint movement in the corridors now, distant doors opening, slow footsteps, the palace gradually waking in its own careful way. Once the uniform was folded, he placed it on the chair, making sure it sat neatly and evenly. He stepped back and looked at it for a moment, satisfied. There was a quiet pleasure in knowing that when he returned at the end of the day, everything would be ready, waiting just as he had left it. He took a cloth from the shelf and wiped the small table by the wall, though it was already clean. Dust gathered quickly in stone buildings, and even when it could not be seen, it felt better to remove it anyway. He wiped the basin, straightened the towel, and adjusted the chair so it was perfectly aligned with the table. None of this was required. No one would inspect his room. No one would praise him for these small efforts. But the servant found comfort in keeping things orderly. It made the hours pass more smoothly, and it gave the day a sense of balance. When he finished, he stood quietly in the center of the room. There was no rush to leave. His next duty would begin soon enough, and until then, this pause belonged to him. He took a slow breath and let it out just as slowly, feeling the steady calm that came from knowing exactly what the day would bring. Eventually, he reached for his keys and slipped them into his pocket. The familiar weight rested against his side, reassuring and constant. He opened the door and stepped back into the corridor, closing it gently behind him. The palace was no longer empty, but it was still quiet. Servants moved about with soft voices and careful steps, all following their own routines. The servant joined them without a word, walking at an even pace, his thoughts unhurried and light. As he made his way toward the next hall, he did not think about the hours ahead or the many small tasks waiting to be done. He simply walked, letting the rhythm of his steps guide him forward. The uniform was folded. The room was in order. The day had begun exactly as it should. The servant walked through the corridors at a steady, unremarkable pace. By now, the palace had begun to wake, but many of the halls remained empty, stretched long and quiet like passages in a dream. His footsteps were soft, practiced, and barely echoed against the stone. He had learned long ago how to move without drawing attention, how to become part of the background rather than something noticed. The walls on either side were lined with faded tapestries, their colors dulled by time. He had passed them so often that he no longer tried to remember what scenes they showed. Knights, gardens, distant castles, it was all the same to him now, woven into the palace as permanently as the stone itself. Still, he found comfort in their presence. They gave the corridors a sense of weight and age, as if the building itself were quietly watching over those who walked within it. As he continued, he passed windows set high in the walls. Pale morning light filtered through them, falling in long, narrow shapes across the floor. The servant stepped through these patches of light without thought, his shadow stretching and shrinking with each step. He did not hurry. There was no one to overtake and no one waiting for him yet. Occasionally, he paused near a doorway, listening. From behind one door came the faint sound of breathing, slow and steady. Behind another, nothing at all. Most doors remained closed, their heavy wood untouched since the night before. He respected these closed spaces. It was not his place to enter unless called. The air in the corridors was cool and still, carrying the familiar scent of stone and old wood. The servant found it calming. He preferred these early hours, when the palace felt open and unclaimed, before voices filled the halls and footsteps grew hurried. In this quiet, he could walk without thinking, letting his body follow paths it knew by heart. He turned a corner and entered a longer hall, one that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. This was a passage he walked many times each day, and yet it never felt shorter. He did not mind that. The length gave him time, and time was something he valued. With each step, the sounds of the palace faded further, replaced by the soft rhythm of his own movement. At the far end, a single door stood slightly ajar. He stopped and gently pushed it closed, careful not to make a sound. The latch clicked softly into place. He waited a moment afterward, listening, then continued on. As he walked, his thoughts remained simple and calm. He thought about nothing in particular, only the steady feel of the floor beneath his feet, the cool air against his skin, and the way the light slowly shifted as the sun rose higher outside. These small details were enough to fill the space of his mind. Eventually, he reached the stairway that led toward the main halls. He placed one hand lightly on the railing and began to descend, step by step, keeping his pace even. There was no reason to rush. The day was long, and it would unfold as it always did. By the time he reached the bottom of the stairs, the corridors behind him were still quiet, unchanged by his passing. He had walked through them as he always did, without disturbance, without notice, and in doing so, he felt the familiar sense of calm settle in once again. The servant reached the side hall where the lamps were kept, a narrow passage lined with evenly spaced sconces. Most of them were unlit, their glass covers clear and spotless, having been cleaned the previous evening. Still, lighting them was part of the morning routine, and routines were not questioned. He carried a small taper in his hand, its flame steady and quiet. He stopped at the first lamp and lifted the glass gently. The metal was cool beneath his fingers. He leaned in slightly and touched the flame to the wick. It caught slowly, as it always did, growing from a small glow into a soft, steady light. He lowered the glass back into place and adjusted it so it sat straight. He moved on to the next lamp, then the next, repeating the same motion each time. Lift. Light. Lower. Adjust. The work required no thought, and he welcomed that. His hands knew what to do without instruction, and his mind remained calm and unoccupied. The lamps cast a warm glow along the stone walls, though the morning light from the windows made them almost unnecessary. The servant was aware of this, but it did not matter. The palace preferred its lamps lit early, just as it preferred them extinguished at night, regardless of the sun. As he worked his way down the hall, the quiet was broken only by the faint sound of flame catching and the soft clink of glass. His breathing remained slow and even. There was no rush to finish, and no one watching to judge his pace. At one lamp, he paused a moment longer than usual, adjusting the wick so the flame would burn evenly. He had learned over time that a poorly set wick could smoke or flicker later in the day. Taking care of such small things now meant fewer interruptions later, and he appreciated that. When all the lamps were lit, he stepped back and looked down the hall. The light was even and gentle, exactly as it should be. The walls glowed softly, and the shadows settled into familiar shapes. Satisfied, he turned and began to retrace his steps, checking each lamp once more as he passed. There was a comfort in this repetition, in knowing that tomorrow he would do the same thing, and the day after that as well. The lamps would be clean again, and he would light them again, just as he always had. When he finished, he extinguished the taper and slipped it back into his pocket. The hall was warm now, calm and unchanged. He took a final slow look around, then moved on toward his next duty, leaving the lamps quietly burning behind him. The servant arrived at the long corridor that led to the king's private chambers. The floor here was smoother than in other parts of the palace, worn down by years of careful footsteps. He slowed his pace even more, out of habit rather than instruction, and stopped a respectful distance from the large wooden door at the end of the hall. The door was closed, as it usually was at this hour. It stood tall and heavy, carved with patterns that the servant had long stopped noticing. He did not look directly at it for long. Instead, he turned slightly to the side and folded his hands in front of him, adopting the posture he had practiced countless times before. Waiting was a familiar part of his duties. It required no action, no decision, and no movement beyond the occasional shift of weight from one foot to the other. He found it restful in its own way. The corridor was quiet, and the lamps he had lit earlier cast a steady glow along the walls. He listened without effort. From behind the door came nothing, no voices, no movement, no sound at all. The king was either still asleep or awake and silent. Either way, the servant's role remained the same. He would stand here until called, or until enough time had passed for him to move on. Minutes drifted by slowly. The servant did not count them. He simply remained where he was, breathing evenly, his gaze resting on a spot in the stone floor a few steps ahead. His thoughts were light and unformed, passing through his mind without staying long. Once, a distant footstep echoed somewhere far down the palace halls, but it faded quickly. The corridor returned to stillness. The servant adjusted his stance slightly, careful to keep his movements quiet and unobtrusive. He had waited outside this door many times before, and he would do so many times again. Each visit was much like the last. The door stayed closed. The corridor stayed quiet. And he stood, patient and unnoticed. Eventually, the time for waiting passed without any signal at all. No summons came, and none was expected. The servant relaxed his hands, took one last calm breath, and turned away from the door. As he walked back down the corridor, his steps were as soft as when he had arrived. The king's door remained closed behind him, unchanged and silent. The servant moved on, carrying with him the familiar calm of a duty completed simply by being present. The servant entered one of the central halls, a wide space where sound seemed to settle rather than echo. Here, the palace felt different, less like a collection of rooms and more like a single living thing. He slowed and stopped near a tall pillar, resting one hand lightly against the cool stone. He stood there without purpose for a while, listening. The palace at dawn had a sound of its own. It was not loud enough to be noticed unless one paid attention, but it was always there. A distant door closing softly. The faint scrape of a chair being moved. Somewhere far above, a window opening to let in air. These sounds blended together into something steady and slow, like breathing. The servant had noticed this years ago, during one of his earliest mornings. Since then, he often paused here, letting the quiet movements of the building pass over him. The light in the hall was changing. Pale blue tones faded into a warmer shade as the sun rose higher. Dust drifted lazily through the air, catching the light for a moment before settling again. The servant watched this without thinking, his eyes following the slow movement until it disappeared. He shifted his weight slightly and adjusted his posture, keeping his back straight. There was no need to hurry onward yet. This moment of stillness was built into the morning, just as surely as any chore or duty. The palace allowed it. A servant passed at the far end of the hall, their footsteps quiet and unhurried. They did not speak or make eye contact. Such things were unnecessary. Each person knew where they were going and what they were meant to do. The servant took a slow breath in and out, matching his breathing to the calm rhythm around him. He felt no rush of thought, no pull of urgency. The day stretched ahead, wide and predictable, and that was comforting. After a while, he pushed gently away from the pillar and resumed walking. His steps blended into the soft sounds of the palace, becoming part of its quiet pulse. The hall behind him continued on just as before, breathing steadily, unchanged by his brief pause. As he moved toward his next task, the dawn fully settled into the palace, bringing with it another day of the same slow, familiar rhythm. The servant took hold of the wooden yoke and lifted it carefully onto his shoulders. 2 buckets hung from either end, filled nearly to the top with clear water. The weight settled evenly, familiar and expected. He adjusted his grip, waited a moment for balance, and then began walking. The long hall stretched ahead of him, straight and quiet. His steps were slow and measured so the water would not spill. With each movement, the surface of the water rippled gently, catching reflections of the lamps along the walls. He watched this for a moment, then let his gaze drift forward again. Carrying water was one of the simplest tasks, and also one of the longest. The distance between the well room and the upper chambers gave him time to move without thinking. The hall did not change as he walked. The same doors passed by, one after another, each closed and silent. The bucket swayed slightly with each step, and the yoke creaked softly. These small sounds blended into the quiet, steady enough to be almost soothing. The servant kept his pace even, neither fast nor slow, just enough to keep the water calm. Halfway down the hall, he paused briefly to rest. He lowered the yoke just enough to ease the strain on his shoulders, then lifted it again. The pause lasted only a moment. There was no reason to linger. As he continued, the light shifted subtly, the reflections on the water changing as he passed beneath each lamp. He found comfort in these small variations. They gave shape to the time, marking his progress without urgency. When he reached the end of the hall, he turned carefully, mindful of the buckets. He walked on toward the rooms where the water would be used, already thinking of the quiet return trip once the buckets were emptied. By the time he set them down, his shoulders felt warm, but not tired. He straightened slowly and took a calm breath. The hall behind him remained long and unchanged, waiting patiently for the next time he would walk it again. After setting the buckets in their place, the servant found himself with a few unclaimed moments. These moments appeared often in the palace, small spaces between tasks where nothing was asked of him. He stood near the wall, hands resting loosely at his sides, and waited. The corridor was neither busy nor empty. A few servants passed now and then, moving quietly, each focused on their own routine. No one spoke. There was no reason to. The air remained cool, and the lamps burned steadily without flicker. He fixed his gaze on a spot where the wall met the floor. The stone there was smooth, worn down by years of footsteps and time. He had noticed this place many times before, though it never looked any different. It was simply there, unchanged and dependable. Minutes passed slowly. The servant did not measure them. He felt them only as a gentle stretching of time, like a long, calm breath. His thoughts drifted in and out without settling on anything in particular. Sometimes he noticed his own breathing. Sometimes he noticed nothing at all. A door opened somewhere nearby, then closed again. The sound was soft and brief. After that, silence returned. The servant shifted his weight slightly from one foot to the other, careful not to disturb the stillness. Standing like this required no effort. There was no pressure to move or act. The palace allowed these pauses, and he accepted them without question. He had learned that not every moment needed to be filled. Eventually, another servant walked past and gave a small nod. The servant returned it just as quietly. No words were exchanged. The nod was enough. When the time came to move on, it did so gently, without announcement. The servant straightened and took a slow step forward, leaving the quiet corner behind. Nothing had happened, and nothing needed to. The day continued, calm and unbroken. The servant made his way up the narrow staircase that led to the upper floors. His steps were careful and even, the stone worn smooth beneath his feet. At the top, the air felt slightly warmer, carrying faint smells of bread and tea drifting from distant rooms. Breakfast on the upper floors was never hurried. The nobles who lived there rose at their own pace, and the servants followed that rhythm. The servant picked up a tray from the side table, its surface already arranged with simple dishes, bread cut evenly, a small bowl of fruit, and a cup set neatly in place. He carried the tray down the corridor, holding it level, his eyes fixed ahead. The doors along this hall were closed, though some showed signs of life now. A murmur of voices behind one door. The soft rustle of fabric behind another. He stopped outside the first room and waited. After a moment, a quiet signal came from within. He stepped inside, placed the tray on a table near the window, and adjusted it slightly so everything sat straight. The room was calm and dim, its occupants still moving slowly through the morning. Without a word, the servant turned and left, closing the door gently behind him. He moved on to the next room, repeating the same careful motions. Place the tray. Adjust the cup. Step back. Each delivery took time, and none of it could be rushed. He did not mind. The slow pace suited the morning. With each room, the light grew brighter, and the hall filled softly with the sounds of quiet conversation and small movements. By the time the last tray was delivered, the servant felt no change in himself. The work had been steady and calm, exactly as expected. He returned the empty tray to its place and paused for a moment in the corridor, letting the gentle sounds of breakfast continue behind closed doors. The servant entered the small room where the silver was kept, a quiet space tucked away from the main halls. Shelves lined the walls, holding trays, cups, and utensils that shone faintly even in the low light. Most of them would not be needed today, but that did not change the task. He selected a single tray and carried it to the table in the center of the room. Setting it down carefully, he took out a soft cloth and began to polish. His movements were slow and circular, following the same pattern he had used for years. The silver was already clean, reflecting his hands and the ceiling above in a muted way. Still, he continued, applying gentle pressure, moving from one edge to the other. The cloth made a faint sound as it brushed against the metal, barely audible in the quiet room. As he worked, his mind remained empty of urgency. There was no list to complete, no count to keep. He polished simply because it was time to polish. The repetition was calming, and he welcomed the steady rhythm of the motion. When one section was finished, he moved on to the next, never hurrying. The tray caught the light slightly as he turned it, though the change was subtle. If it became any shinier, he did not notice. Once the tray was done, he inspected it briefly, then returned it to its shelf. He selected another piece and began again, repeating the same gentle motions. Time passed without marking itself. The silver remained unused, just as it would remain unused tomorrow. The servant continued polishing, content in the quiet, knowing that this small, unnecessary task fit perfectly into the slow shape of the day. After returning the last piece of silver to its place, the servant stepped out into a wide corridor that opened onto the inner courtyard. Tall windows lined one side, allowing sunlight to spill across the stone floor in long, pale shapes. He stopped near the wall and stood quietly, facing the light. The sun had risen high enough now to reach places it could not touch earlier in the morning. The light moved slowly, almost without notice, shifting inch by inch across the floor. The servant watched this change without thinking about it, letting his eyes follow the gentle progress. The stone beneath the light looked warmer, its color slightly softer than the shaded areas. Dust floated lazily through the bright air, appearing and disappearing as it crossed the sunlight. The servant noticed this, then stopped noticing it, his attention drifting easily. A distant sound of voices echoed faintly from the courtyard below, but it was too far away to be clear. The palace felt calm and settled, as if it had fully woken and found nothing urgent to do. He shifted his stance slightly, placing more weight on one foot, then back again. There was no discomfort, only the quiet awareness of standing. The light continued to move, unbothered by his presence. Eventually, the sun reached the edge of the window frame, and the shape on the floor began to fade. The servant watched until it disappeared completely, leaving the stone cool and evenly shaded once more. He took a slow breath and turned away from the window. The moment had passed, but another like it would come later in the day. With unhurried steps, he continued on, carrying the calm of the sunlight with him. The servant was given a tray to hold and told to wait. The tray was not heavy, but it required both hands, and he balanced it carefully at waist height. On it sat a teapot, 2 cups, and a small plate of biscuits arranged neatly in the center. Nothing was missing, and nothing would be added. He stood just inside the doorway of a sitting room where 2 nobles were already deep in conversation. Their voices were low and steady, rising and falling without urgency. The servant did not listen closely. He had learned long ago how to let words pass by without meaning. Time moved slowly in the room. The conversation circled the same topics, returning to them again and again in slightly different ways. The servant remained still, shifting his grip only when necessary to keep the tray balanced. Part 12, Holding a Tray During a Very Long Conversation. The servant was given a tray to hold and told to wait. The tray was not heavy, but it required both hands, and he balanced it carefully at waist height. On it sat a teapot, 2 cups, and a small plate of biscuits arranged neatly in the center. Nothing was missing, and nothing would be added. He stood just inside the doorway of a sitting room where 2 nobles were already deep in conversation. Their voices were low and steady, rising and falling without urgency. The servant did not listen closely. He had learned long ago how to let words pass by without meaning. Time moved slowly in the room. The conversation circled the same topics, returning to them again and again in slightly different ways. The servant remained still, shifting his grip only when necessary to keep the tray balanced. The teapot remained untouched. Steam rose gently from its spout and faded into the air. The biscuits stayed exactly where they were, unbroken and undisturbed. The servant's arms felt steady, neither tired nor tense. He focused on standing evenly, keeping his shoulders relaxed. The floor beneath him was smooth, familiar, and cool through the soles of his shoes. Occasionally, one of the nobles gestured or paused, and the servant adjusted his stance slightly, ready to step forward if called. But no call came. The conversation continued at its unhurried pace, filling the room without changing anything. At last, the voices softened and drifted to a close. The servant stepped forward, placed the tray on the table, and waited briefly. When it was clear he was no longer needed, he lifted the tray again and left the room as quietly as he had entered, carrying with him the calm weight of time passed slowly and without event. The servant moved from room to room along the southern wing, where tall windows faced the gardens below. Each window was dressed with heavy curtains, their fabric thick and dark, meant to keep the rooms cool and quiet. His task was simple and familiar: open some, close others, and make sure each one rested exactly as it should. He stopped at the first window and grasped the curtain cord. With a gentle pull, the fabric shifted smoothly aside, allowing light to spill into the room. He adjusted the folds carefully, ensuring they fell evenly from top to bottom. When he stepped back, the window looked calm and balanced. At the next room, the curtains were already open. Here, he closed them instead, drawing the fabric together slowly. The light faded, and the room grew softer and dimmer. He straightened the edges and tied the cord in a neat loop. Each room required a slightly different touch, but the pattern remained the same. Open. Adjust. Step back. Or close. Straighten. Step away. The servant did not hurry. There was no benefit in rushing such work. As he continued, the sounds of the palace drifted faintly through the halls, quiet footsteps, distant voices, the occasional closing door. None of it disturbed his focus. His attention stayed on the curtains and the small details that made them look orderly. By the time he reached the end of the wing, the light outside had shifted again. Some rooms now held more shadow, others more brightness. The servant took a final slow walk back along the corridor, checking each window once more. Satisfied, he turned away. The curtains would remain this way until the evening, when he or another servant would repeat the routine again, just as calmly and without comment. The servant was asked to escort two nobles from one end of the palace to the other. He positioned himself a few steps ahead, walking at a pace that was neither too fast nor too slow. Behind him, their voices drifted quietly, continuing a conversation that had clearly begun long before he arrived. They moved through familiar corridors, passing doors and windows without pause. The servant led the way, turning corners smoothly, already knowing the path by heart. He did not speak unless spoken to, and no words were directed toward him. As they walked, one noble slowed slightly to examine a tapestry. The servant stopped and waited, hands folded loosely in front of him. When they resumed walking, he moved again without comment. Their footsteps echoed softly behind him, uneven and unhurried. The servant focused on keeping his pace steady, allowing enough space so they could follow comfortably. He felt no impatience. Escorting often took longer than expected, and he had learned to accept that. They reached their destination after some time, a small sitting room near the western wing. The servant opened the door and stepped aside. The nobles passed him without looking, still speaking to one another, their voices fading as they entered the room. He closed the door gently and stood for a moment in the corridor. The task was complete. He had guided them where they needed to go, unnoticed and unacknowledged, exactly as required. With a quiet breath, he turned and walked back the way he had come, blending once more into the slow rhythm of the palace. The servant found a small wooden bench near the garden gate and sat down carefully. The bench rested against the stone wall, worn smooth by years of use. It was placed just far enough from the path that no one would trip over it, and just close enough to the gate that he could be useful if needed. The garden beyond the gate was quiet at this hour. Leaves moved slightly in a light breeze, making a soft, steady sound. The servant watched this without focus, his eyes resting on the slow motion of branches and shadows. From where he sat, he could see a narrow path winding between trimmed hedges. No one walked along it. The garden seemed to wait, much like the palace halls did earlier in the day. The servant rested his hands on his knees and let his shoulders relax. Time passed gently. A bird landed briefly on the gate, then flew away. The servant noticed, then returned his gaze to the path. The bench felt firm beneath him, steady and dependable. He listened to the quiet sounds around him, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of voices from inside the palace, the soft shift of air. None of it required his attention. He was simply there. Eventually, a shadow moved across the ground as clouds passed overhead. The light changed, then settled again. The servant adjusted his position slightly, careful not to creak the bench. When it was time to stand, he did so slowly. He took one last look at the empty path, then turned back toward the palace. The bench remained where it was, ready for the next pause, just as the day continued on in its calm, unbroken way. As the afternoon settled in, the palace grew warmer and quieter. This was the time for chores that were rarely mentioned and never praised. The servant began with the small things, the tasks that filled the spaces between more visible duties. He checked door hinges and pressed them gently to be sure they closed without sound. Where one creaked slightly, he added a careful drop of oil and wiped away the excess. The door swung again, smooth and silent. He nodded once, satisfied. Next, he gathered a small basket and moved through a side corridor, collecting loose items that had been left behind. A folded cloth on a bench. A cup resting on a ledge. A pair of gloves placed neatly but forgotten. Each item was returned to where it belonged. He wiped railings along a staircase, though they showed no sign of dust. His cloth moved slowly along the wood, following its shape. When he reached the top, he folded the cloth again and placed it back in his pocket. In one quiet room, he straightened a chair that was only slightly out of place. He aligned it with the table and stepped back to check. The difference was small, but noticeable to him. These chores took time, though they did not look like much when finished. That was how they were meant to be. The palace worked best when such things were done quietly and without attention. When the list of small tasks finally ended, the servant paused in the corridor. Nothing looked different, and that was the point. He took a slow breath and moved on, carrying the calm satisfaction of work done without notice. The servant carried a small wooden box filled with ink bottles and clean cloths. He walked slowly along a corridor lined with study rooms and writing chambers, most of them empty at this hour. The doors stood open, inviting only quiet footsteps. He entered the first room and set the box down on a wide desk. The surface was smooth and clear, except for a few papers neatly stacked at one corner. He picked up the ink pot, checked its level, and poured in a careful amount of fresh ink. He wiped the rim before setting it back in place. Each room followed the same pattern. Step inside. Set down the box. Refill the pot. Wipe away any trace of spill. Close the lid gently. The servant moved with practiced ease, his hands steady and unhurried. The rooms were silent, filled with the faint smell of paper and old wood. Sunlight filtered in softly through high windows, resting on desks and shelves. The servant noticed how the light fell differently in each room, though the furniture remained the same. In one chamber, he paused a moment longer to straighten a stack of papers that leaned slightly. He aligned their edges and moved on without thought. When the last ink pot was filled, he closed the box and lifted it carefully. He looked once more around the room, ensuring everything was in order. Satisfied, he left quietly, pulling the door almost closed behind him. The corridor returned to silence as he walked away, the ink pots waiting patiently for words that would be written later. The servant reached the narrow stone staircase that connected the lower halls to the upper chambers. By now, he had walked these steps many times already, and still more trips waited ahead. He placed his hand on the railing and began to climb. Each step felt familiar beneath his feet. Some stones were slightly uneven, worn down more than others, and he adjusted his pace without thinking. His breathing remained steady as he moved upward, one step after another. At the top, he paused only briefly before turning and going back down again. There was something to deliver below, something to check above. The reason mattered less than the movement itself. The staircase echoed softly with each footstep, though the sound faded quickly into the surrounding halls. He kept his pace even, neither quick nor slow. The railing was smooth where countless hands had rested before his. By the fifth trip, the light through the nearby window had shifted. By the 10th, the air felt warmer. The servant noticed these changes without attaching meaning to them. They simply marked time passing. When he finally stopped at the bottom, he rested his hand against the wall for a moment. His legs felt steady, not tired, just used. He took a calm breath and looked up the stairs once more before turning away. The staircase remained exactly as it was, waiting patiently for the next time he would walk it again. The servant stood near a quiet sitting room where the curtains were drawn and the light was dim. Inside, someone rested, and his task was simply to remain nearby in case he was needed. He positioned himself against the wall and waited. The afternoon had settled into its slowest hours. The palace seemed to hold its breath, wrapped in soft silence. Footsteps were rare now, and voices were barely heard. He listened to the stillness more than to any sound. From time to time, a faint shift came from behind the door, then nothing again. The servant adjusted his stance slightly, careful not to disturb the calm. His thoughts drifted lazily. He noticed the cool stone through his shoes, the way the air felt heavier in the quiet. Time stretched gently, unmarked by bells or calls. A servant passed once, then did not return. The corridor returned to silence. The servant continued waiting, his presence steady and unnoticed. Eventually, the quiet nap ended without announcement. The servant was not called, and that was fine. When the time came, he stepped away from the wall and moved on, leaving the peaceful stillness behind exactly as he found it. The servant entered the cool storage room where the evening meal would begin its quiet preparation. The room smelled faintly of bread, herbs, and clean stone. Shelves lined the walls, holding baskets and jars arranged with careful order. He selected a few simple items and placed them on a small table. Nothing was cooked yet. There was no heat, no urgency. Dinner in the palace was a slow event, planned long before it arrived. He washed vegetables in a shallow basin, letting the water run calmly over them. Each one was set aside neatly, aligned with the others. He trimmed what needed trimming and left the rest untouched. Knives were checked and placed in order. Cloths were folded and set where they would be easy to reach later. Everything was made ready, then left to wait. The servant stepped back and looked at the table. It appeared unchanged, simple and quiet. That was correct. He dried his hands and moved on, leaving the room cool and prepared. The evening meal would come in its own time, and the palace would be ready for it without hurry. The servant was handed a small folded note and given quiet instructions to deliver it. He placed it carefully in his pocket and began walking through the palace corridors once again. The message felt light, almost insignificant, and that was often the case. He followed a familiar route, passing through halls that looked no different from earlier in the day. The lamps burned steadily, and the air remained calm. His footsteps echoed softly, then faded. When he reached the door he was meant to visit, he knocked once, gently. After a moment, the door opened just enough for him to pass the note inside. No words were exchanged. The door closed again. The servant stood there for a brief moment, then turned away. The message had said what it needed to say, though he did not know its contents. Many messages were like this, small, quiet, and easily forgotten. As he walked back, his mind remained clear. The task had been completed, and there was nothing more to consider. The palace continued on, unchanged by the delivery of a note that carried very little weight. As the evening meal began, the servant took his place along the wall of the dining hall. The room was larger than most, its ceiling high and its table long, but the atmosphere remained calm. Lamps cast a warm glow over polished wood and neatly arranged plates. The servant stood still, hands folded, eyes lowered slightly. His role was to be present without being noticed. The guests spoke in low voices, their conversation steady and unhurried. Plates were passed, cups were filled, and cutlery moved softly against porcelain. The servant listened only to the rhythm of it, not the meaning. He shifted his weight once, then returned to stillness. No one called for him. He remained where he was, watching without focus, letting the evening pass slowly. When the meal neared its end, he stepped forward only when needed, then returned to the wall. The room gradually quieted as plates emptied and voices softened. The servant stayed until the last moment, steady and unseen, just as he was meant to be. When the evening meal had finished and the last voices softened into quiet pauses, the servant began clearing the table. He did not rush. There was no need to. The guests lingered, sitting back in their chairs, and the room held a calm, tired feeling, as if it, too, was ready to rest. He stepped forward and lifted the first plate, careful not to let it touch the others. The porcelain was warm from the meal. He carried it to the side table and set it down gently, aligning it with the plates already there. Then he returned for the next one. Each plate was cleared separately. Lift. Turn. Walk. Set down. Return. The rhythm was slow and steady, almost meditative. Cutlery followed, then cups, then small serving dishes that had barely been used. Nothing clattered. Nothing scraped. The servant had practiced this quiet movement for years. The lamps flickered softly above, their light reflecting off the polished surface of the table as it gradually emptied. The servant noticed how the table looked larger with each plate removed, its surface revealed inch by inch. The wood beneath was smooth and dark, marked faintly by time. Occasionally, a guest shifted in their chair or cleared their throat. The servant adjusted his path slightly to avoid disturbing them, always keeping a respectful distance. No one spoke to him, and he did not expect them to. His presence was part of the background, like the walls or the lamps. As the stack of plates grew on the side table, he paused to straighten them, ensuring they were evenly placed and safe to carry later. He wiped a small spot from the table where a cup had rested, though it was barely visible. The room grew quieter as the clearing continued. One by one, the guests rose and left, their footsteps fading into the corridors beyond. The servant remained until the last chair was empty. When the table was finally clear, he stood for a moment and looked at it. The meal was finished. The room felt lighter now, calmer. He picked up the last tray and carried it away, his steps slow and even. Behind him, the dining hall settled into stillness, ready for the night, as the servant moved on to the next quiet task without a thought of hurry. The servant paused in a long corridor near the eastern wing, where faint music drifted through the air. It came from a room farther inside the palace, softened by walls and distance. The sound was gentle, barely more than a suggestion of melody. He stopped walking and stood still, not close enough to see the musicians, and not invited to enter. That was fine. He did not feel the need to move closer. The music reached him just as it was, quiet and incomplete. The notes rose and fell slowly, blending with the natural hush of the palace. At times, the tune faded almost entirely, then returned again. The servant listened without trying to follow it, letting it pass through his thoughts like a breeze. He leaned lightly against the wall, careful not to make a sound. The stone felt cool through his uniform. His breathing slowed, matching the unhurried pace of the distant music. After a while, the melody changed, then softened, then stopped altogether. The corridor returned to its usual silence. The servant waited a moment longer, as if to be sure, then pushed himself gently away from the wall. He resumed walking, leaving the music behind without regret. The palace did not ask him to stay, and he did not need to. The quiet returned fully, and he carried it with him as he went on. The servant entered the storage room where the palace tools were kept. The room was narrow and orderly, with hooks along the walls and shelves stacked carefully from floor to ceiling. Everything had its place, and everything was expected to return there. He carried a small bundle of items gathered throughout the day. One by one, he returned them. A cloth was folded and placed on its shelf, aligned with the others. A small brush was hung on its hook, handle facing the same direction as the rest. He checked each spot before moving on, making sure nothing was missing and nothing was out of order. Where an item was slightly misplaced, he corrected it with a gentle touch. The room grew quieter as the work continued. There was a satisfaction in seeing the shelves full and balanced again, though no one would comment on it. The servant did not need recognition. When the last tool was returned, he stood in the center of the room and looked around. Everything was as it should be. He closed the door softly behind him and moved on, leaving the tools waiting patiently for the next day. As the sun set beyond the palace walls, a gentle stillness began to settle over the halls. The servant walked slowly through corridors that were now dimmer, the lamps providing a softer, warmer light than earlier in the day. Shadows rested in corners, unmoving and calm. Doors closed one by one as the evening ended. The sounds of conversation faded, replaced by the soft hush of fabric and the distant echo of footsteps moving toward private rooms. The servant noticed these changes without reacting to them. They came every night, just as expected. He paused near a window and looked out at the darkening sky. The last traces of light slipped away, leaving the glass to reflect the quiet glow of the lamps behind him. He stood there briefly, then turned back into the corridor. The palace now felt heavier, not in a troubling way, but in a settled one. The air was cooler, the silence deeper. The servant adjusted his pace, walking even more slowly, as if matching the building's mood. When he reached the far end of the hall, he stopped and listened. There was almost nothing to hear. Satisfied, he continued on, moving gently through the palace as it prepared for rest, carrying the calm of sunset into the night. The servant returned to his small room at the edge of the palace as night fully settled in. The corridor outside was quiet now, the lamps dim and steady. He closed the door softly behind him and stood for a moment, letting the stillness surround him. He removed his uniform slowly, folding each piece with the same care he had used that morning. The fabric felt familiar in his hands, worn smooth by time and repetition. Shirt first, then vest, then belt, placed neatly on the chair. From a small chest, he took out his plain clothes. They were simple and comfortable, made for rest rather than duty. He dressed without hurry, adjusting the sleeves and smoothing the fabric as he went. When he finished, he placed the uniform exactly where it belonged, ready for the next day. He washed his hands and face, the water cool and refreshing, and dried them carefully. The room felt quieter now, smaller and more personal. The servant sat briefly on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly. The day had passed as it always did, full of small tasks and long pauses. After a moment, he stood again, the weight of duty set aside for the night. The plain clothes rested easily on him as he prepared for the final quiet moments before sleep. Dressed in plain clothes, the servant stepped back into the palace corridors for one final walk. The halls were nearly dark now, lit only by a few lamps left burning for the night. Their light was low and steady, casting long, gentle shadows along the walls. He walked slowly, his footsteps softer than ever. Most doors were closed, and behind them the palace slept. The servant passed each one without pause, careful not to disturb the quiet. The air felt cooler, and the stone beneath his feet held the chill of night. He moved through familiar paths, though everything seemed different in the darkness, quieter, calmer, almost distant. At the end of one corridor, he stopped and listened. There was nothing to hear. The palace rested fully now, wrapped in silence. Satisfied, he turned and made his way back. The halls remained still behind him, unchanged by his passing, as he completed his final duty of the day. The servant returned once more to his small room and closed the door quietly behind him. The palace beyond was silent now, and no further steps were expected of him. He lit a small lamp on the table, its flame gentle and steady, just enough to soften the darkness. He sat down on the chair near the wall and rested his hands in his lap. The room was simple and unchanged, exactly as he preferred it. Nothing needed to be moved. Nothing needed to be done. For a while, he sat without thought, letting the days settle inside him. The many small tasks he had completed felt distant now, blending together into a single, calm memory. There was no moment that stood out more than another. That, too, felt right. He listened to the quiet, noticing how different it was from the daytime silence. This was deeper, heavier, full of rest. His breathing slowed naturally, matching the stillness around him. Eventually, he stood and extinguished the lamp. The room fell into shadow, familiar and comforting. He lay down on the bed and pulled the blanket over himself, arranging it carefully. The servant closed his eyes, knowing the palace would wake again tomorrow, and he would wake with it. For now, there was only rest, and he allowed himself to sink gently into it. The servant slept without dreams, wrapped in a quiet that felt deep and complete. The palace around him held its breath through the night, stone walls resting under the stars. Time passed gently, unnoticed and unmeasured. At some point, the darkness began to thin. It was not sudden. It never was. A faint gray light touched the edge of the small window, barely enough to notice. The servant remained still, breathing slow and even, unaware of the change. The palace began its earliest movements long before voices or footsteps returned. Wood settled. Stone cooled and warmed in subtle shifts. Somewhere far away, a door opened and closed, soft as a thought. None of it disturbed him. Eventually, his breathing changed. It deepened, then steadied again. His body adjusted beneath the blanket, finding comfort without waking. The bed creaked faintly and then fell silent. Light continued to grow, slowly filling the room. Shapes became clearer, the outline of the chair, the edge of the table, the folded uniform waiting patiently where it had been placed. Everything was ready, just as it had been the night before. The servant opened his eyes at last. He did not move right away. He never did. He lay there, looking at the ceiling, letting the morning arrive fully before greeting it. There was no rush. There never was. He listened. The palace was still mostly asleep, but not entirely. A distant step echoed once, then faded. Somewhere, water moved through pipes or stone channels, a soft, steady sound. He sat up slowly and placed his feet on the floor. The stone was cool, familiar. He sat there for a moment longer, hands resting on his knees, breathing in the quiet of the new day. Nothing felt different. That was comforting. He stood and stretched gently, not enough to wake the room too quickly. He washed his face with cool water, the same motions he had made countless mornings before. The water woke him just enough. Then he reached for his uniform. The fabric felt the same as always. He dressed carefully, piece by piece, smoothing each fold, adjusting each tie. When he finished, he looked exactly as he was meant to. The plain clothes were folded and placed away. The bed was straightened. The chair returned to its place. The room held no trace of sleep, only readiness. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. Morning light crept along the stone floors, pale and calm. The palace was waking slowly, stretching into the day. The servant began to walk. There would be doors to open, floors to sweep, objects to place and replace. There would be long corridors and quiet pauses, familiar paths and familiar silence. Nothing surprising. Nothing demanding. And that was enough. He moved forward at his steady pace, blending into the rhythm of the palace once more. The day unfolded ahead of him, wide and quiet, full of small tasks that would be completed one by one. Behind him, the night faded completely. Ahead, the palace waited. And the servant continued on, just as he always had, just as he always would, carrying the calm of yesterday into today, and today into tomorrow, one gentle step at a time.